Something massive is moving through the void. At first, it looked like a faint glimmer, a tiny cold reflection against the black canvas of space. But when NASA turned the James Webb Space Telescope toward it, the world stopped. What appeared on that glowing golden mirror didn't look like a rock or a comet or anything humanity had ever captured before. The object was enormous, structured, perfectly symmetrical, and it was glowing from within. If you're watching this right now, don't look away, because what you're about to hear may change the way you think about space, life, and reality itself. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe, because this story is only the beginning. It started weeks ago when an automated detection system at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory flagged an unknown object entering the outer solar system. At first, it was classified as a possible long-period comet, catalogued under a new designation, 3I Atlas. But something wasn't right. The trajectory didn't match a natural comet. The speed didn't make sense. It was accelerating as if powered by something intelligent. Astronomers noticed that 3I Atlas was traveling along a hyperbolic path, similar to that of Oumuamua back in 2017 and Borisov in 2019, two other interstellar visitors that briefly crossed our solar system before vanishing into deep space. But this time, there was a difference. 3I Atlas was bigger, much bigger. Nearly 20 kilometers across, that's larger than some of Earth's biggest mountains. And unlike Oumuamua, it wasn't silent. Radio arrays from multiple observatories, including the Very Large Array in New Mexico and the Deep Space Network in Spain, began to detect faint pulses, rhythmic, repeating almost like a heartbeat. At first, scientists assumed it was interference. Then the same pattern was detected again from 3 separate antennas thousands of kilometers apart. That's when NASA decided to bring in James Webb. The James Webb Telescope was never built to look for life. It was built to look back in time to capture the first light from the early universe. But when its instruments locked onto the coordinates of 3I Atlas, even the engineers monitoring the feed didn't know what to say. In the first infrared exposure, they saw sharp metallic reflections, not dust, not ice, not gas jets like comets usually have. Instead, the object seemed to be covered in layers of some unknown composite material, smooth, angular, and strangely patterned, as if designed rather than formed. Every hour that passed, the data came in clearer. Spectral analysis showed traces of elements not naturally occurring in our solar system. Titanium-like compounds, crystalline alloys that reflect light in ways no natural material does. Then came the images, frames so surreal that NASA initially kept them classified for review. At the center of 3I Atlas was what appeared to be an open cavity, circular, almost like an eye, and behind that dark core was something faintly glowing, pulsing with red and violet energy. That's when one engineer whispered on the open feed, "Is it looking back at us?" Since that moment, speculation has exploded online. Was it a derelict spacecraft? A probe from another civilization? Or something much older, an artifact from a forgotten cosmic age that predates the Milky Way itself? The strangest part, no one can agree on what powers it. 3I Atlas is accelerating, yes, but not in a way that follows known physics. No visible propulsion, no ion trail, no solar sail. Instead, it moves like it's riding gravity itself, bending the space around it, subtly but consistently, as if it's using the sun's pull to slingshot toward the inner solar system. Its projected course, if unchanged, will bring it near Jupiter within months, and then toward the orbit of Mars. Not close enough to hit Earth, but close enough to see. And that's what terrifies everyone at NASA, because this time they're not just watching a rock drift by, they're watching something that seems to be moving on purpose. James Webb's latest infrared captures show that as it approaches sunlight, the internal glow inside 3I Atlas intensifies like an ancient engine awakening after billions of years of silence. And still, that same faint pulse continues to hum in the background of every data transmission. Measured at 1,420 megahertz, the same frequency used by scientists to search for alien signals, the frequency of neutral hydrogen, the most common element in the universe. It's almost as if someone wanted us to notice. For now, NASA's official statement is vague. An interstellar object of unusual composition currently under observation. But leaked memos suggest otherwise. Engineers reportedly saw microfluctuations in the sun's corona seconds after Webb's high-resolution scan of the object, as if something in the system had responded to being watched. Whatever 3I Atlas is, it's not just a visitor, it's an event. And this is only the beginning. The first leak appeared on a Friday night. An anonymous user on a private astronomy forum posted 3 blurred images allegedly from a Webb data packet taken 2 days before NASA's official press embargo. Within hours, the files were everywhere. Twitter, Reddit, Telegram. Every corner of the internet lit up with the same haunting frame. A massive glowing structure hovering in the black, its surface smooth, reflective, and distinctly geometric. To most, it looked like a colossal spacecraft. To others, it was proof that NASA had discovered something they couldn't explain. Within 12 hours, NASA's servers were flooded. Millions of requests from around the world, all trying to access the same restricted folder, JWST Atlas Sequence 5. By sunrise, the folder was gone. That same morning, during a closed press conference, one of the agency's spokespersons said calmly, "These images are under review. We ask the public to avoid speculation." But it was too late for that. People everywhere started calling it the Eye. Memes, theories, and digital breakdowns filled every platform. Some claimed the object looked like an ancient Dyson structure, a massive energy-harvesting sphere designed to absorb starlight. Others swore it resembled a city-sized engine drifting through space, with glowing hexagonal panels that looked eerily similar to James Webb's own mirrors. But what no one outside NASA knew was that the data contained more than just images. It contained sound. Deep within the radio spectrogram, there was a low, steady pulse repeating at perfect intervals, every 7.9 seconds. When the signal was converted into audio frequencies, it produced a rhythmic vibration like a mechanical heartbeat echoing through space. And each pulse carried a subtle modulation as if encoded. Scientists described it as too structured to be natural. One of Webb's analysts, Dr. Emil Vargas, later admitted in an internal memo, It doesn't sound like random cosmic noise. It sounds intentional. Across the planet, theories spiraled out of control. Was this an alien beacon? A dormant probe reactivating after billions of years? Or perhaps a warning, something ancient and patient, finally stirring in the dark? Meanwhile, inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California, a small team of data engineers was given clearance to analyze the unfiltered raw feed from Webb. And what they found only deepened the mystery. The reflection patterns on 3I Atlas weren't static. They shifted not chaotically, but in measured mathematical sequences. One frame would show a glowing lattice on the surface. In the next, it would fade, only for a new pattern to emerge elsewhere, as if the entire structure were breathing in slow motion. When the spectral readings were compared side by side, an eerie correlation appeared. Each shift in light coincided exactly with the timing of that faint pulse. In other words, whatever was inside the object was synchronized with its outer shell. It was alive in some way, or at least active. NASA's internal chat logs, later leaked by someone on the team, reveal a growing sense of unease. A systems engineer wrote, "If this thing's energy field reacts to light, then Webb's scan might have triggered it." And sure enough, 2 days later, the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory picked up something no one expected, a minor anomaly in the solar wind, directly in line with 3I Atlas's position. A faint, localized distortion in the plasma flow, as if something invisible had bent the stream around itself. At first, it was dismissed as sensor noise, but the next reading showed the same distortion again, only stronger. Then, for 30 full minutes, every satellite within that sector of deep space lost contact. When they came back online, their internal clocks had drifted all by the exact same amount, 1.44 seconds. That number shouldn't have meant anything, but later analysis revealed it matched a frequency embedded inside the pulse coming from the object itself. It was as if 3I Atlas had reached out and touched the entire system at once. NASA called for silence. Meetings were classified. The words national security began appearing in subject lines of internal emails. And for the first time since the Apollo era, Webb's data stream was partially encrypted even for its own research partners. But outside the official channels, the world's telescopes continued watching. The European Space Agency, the Chinese National Observatory, and even independent astronomers from Chile to Australia all confirmed it. 3I Atlas had changed course. Just slightly, but undeniably. It was now moving a fraction faster, as if responding to something. Some claimed it was heading toward Jupiter. Others believed it was adjusting to avoid detection. But one particular trajectory simulation showed something that no one wanted to believe, that if it continued its subtle acceleration pattern, it could eventually cross the orbit of Earth. By now, the internet was alive with paranoia. Thousands of people tracked its path in real time, watching tiny dots move across virtual maps of the solar system. But beyond all the noise and speculation, there was a deeper question. What was it waiting for? Because despite its sheer size and power, 3I Atlas hadn't done anything aggressive. It hadn't emitted dangerous radiation or changed direction dramatically. It just watched. The pulse continued every 7.9 seconds, unwavering, and yet that alone was enough to keep scientists awake at night. What kind of intelligence builds something that waits silently for eons, crossing the black between stars, just to arrive here now when humanity finally has a telescope powerful enough to see it? Coincidence? Or timing? The next images from James Webb would make that question irrelevant. At precisely 3:17 UTC, during a deep field observation, the telescope recorded something breathtaking. A beam of faint ultraviolet light emitted from the center of 3I Atlas lanced across millions of kilometers of space, hitting a cluster of dust near Jupiter's orbit. For 10 seconds, that dust glowed white-hot, then vanished completely erased, as if atomized. Scientists on duty described the reaction as impossible. The amount of focused energy required would exceed anything a natural object could produce. NASA immediately halted the live relay feed, but the data had already been mirrored by several external observatories, and by morning the event was confirmed. 3I Atlas had fired something. The tone inside NASA changed overnight. It was no longer a curiosity. It was a potential threat, but no one wanted to admit it publicly. If the world found out that a massive, structured, self-powered object had just performed a precision energy burst inside our solar system, panic would follow. So the story was reframed. An anomaly in deep space observation. Possible reflection artifact? Unconfirmed optical interference. But behind closed doors, everyone knew. Something had awakened, and whatever it was, it had just spoken its first word. When the energy burst from 3I Atlas was first detected, NASA's Deep Space Network immediately went silent. Every dish, every line of communication, every optical feed paused. There were no alarms, just silence. A silence that lasted too long to be ordinary. Inside Mission Control, the atmosphere was heavy. Monitors still showed the same frozen image, that faint beam of ultraviolet light stretching across the void. It wasn't wide, like a laser. It was narrow, impossibly precise, a line so focused that it looked like a thread of glass stretched between the stars. And when the data from Webb finally synced with ground systems, the analysts realized something none of them were prepared for. The beam wasn't random. It was coded. Over the next 48 hours, the team broke the signal down into segments. Each pulse within the beam had been separated by perfect intervals, not just rhythmic, but mathematically deliberate. The sequence repeated every 1,420 megahertz, the same frequency tied to hydrogen, the most basic and universal element in existence. It was as if the message had been built on the language of the cosmos itself, the one thing every civilization, human or alien, would recognize. Inside the secure data lab, lead cryptographer Dr. Eleanor Shaw replayed the frequency translation through an acoustic synthesizer. What came out wasn't just noise. It sounded like layered tones, harmonic, resonant, almost like music, long, droning notes rising and falling in intervals that mirrored the golden ratio, patterns that echoed both mathematical symmetry and emotion. "It's not random," she said quietly. "It's intentional. It's structured like a greeting. But a greeting from who? Or from what? When the discovery reached NASA's leadership, they made an unprecedented decision to temporarily restrict Webb's targeting coordinates. For the first time since its launch, the telescope's mirrors were locked into a safe observational pattern, forbidden to focus on the object again. But curiosity doesn't rest, and neither did the data. Webb's onboard sensors, even when aimed away, continued to register faint background interference. Weak, ghostly signals rippling through the deep space spectrum. The object wasn't waiting to be watched anymore. It was reaching out quietly, persistently, like a whisper bleeding into every antenna on Earth. By now, the world had begun to sense that something was off. Independent astronomers were noticing strange readings from their own small telescopes. Tiny but consistent fluctuations in radio noise that seemed to pulse in harmony across continents. Some described it as a hum that appeared and disappeared at exact global intervals, like the Earth itself had become part of a synchronized network. Online forums erupted with speculation. Is it talking to us? Is it scanning Earth? Or is it sending for something else? The official line from NASA remained unchanged. No confirmed evidence of artificial activity. But behind those denials, private memos painted a different story. On the 16th of November, a classified briefing was held at the Goddard Space Flight Center. Only a handful of scientists were present. On the central display, the lead astrophysicist projected the decoded structure of the ultraviolet beam. It wasn't just a pattern. It was a map of the solar system. Every planet, every orbit, perfectly plotted except one. There, in the upper right quadrant, a faint symbol appeared. Not a planet, not a star, but a single glowing point placed just beyond Jupiter's orbit. "What's that?" someone asked. Dr. Shaw looked at the screen. Her voice was steady but low. "It's a coordinate marker, a rendezvous point." At first, no one spoke. The data was reviewed again and again, and each time the conclusion remained the same. 3i Atlas wasn't broadcasting a message to Earth. It was sending one outward. Somewhere beyond Jupiter, in the cold reaches of the outer solar system, it was calling something. Meanwhile, the object itself had changed again. Infrared scans from the European Southern Observatory revealed that the inner cavity, the eye, was now fully illuminated, glowing with a stable frequency of light that pulsed in sync with the earlier radio patterns. The glow wasn't constant. It fluctuated slowly, like a heartbeat or a countdown. The public still didn't know the full truth, but fragments of the story began leaking through encrypted chats and astronomy subreddits. Users began overlaying known orbital maps onto the coordinates derived from the pulse pattern. And to their shock, the coordinates lined up almost perfectly with an area known as the Trojan Cluster, a dense collection of asteroids that orbit the Sun along the path of Jupiter. But what terrified scientists most wasn't where the message pointed. It was when the projected alignment between 3i Atlas and that exact region would occur on December 19th, 2025. Roughly 54 days from the time the first signal was detected. Something was being summoned, and it was already on its way. In those following weeks, the energy readings near the object continued to climb. Every instrument that observed it, from Webb's infrared sensors to small-scale ground telescopes, showed the same data. The radiation pattern wasn't chaotic. It was intensifying logarithmically, like a system charging. Astronomers compared it to a capacitor building energy, a long, slow inhale before the exhale. Whatever was coming next would release unimaginable power. Some believed it was preparing to move again. Others feared it was about to open. By December, the object's surface temperature had begun to fluctuate wildly, oscillating between freezing cold and molten hot in regular waves. It was behaving like a living thing, breathing, waiting. Then, one night, without warning, NASA's Solar Observation Network detected a faint gravitational ripple similar to what's seen when massive objects accelerate through space. Except this ripple didn't originate from 3I Atlas. It came from the direction it was pointing to. That was the moment every assumption about what they were dealing with vanished. Because something else had entered the solar system. Something massive. Something that wasn't on any known trajectory or survey record. And it was moving toward 3I Atlas. The moment the second object was detected, everything changed. It was faint at first, a distant distortion in the star field, invisible to ordinary telescopes, but unmistakable in deep field data. It didn't glow, didn't reflect, didn't even cast a shadow. It simply absorbed. Astronomers described it as a void, a region of light that swallowed the photons around it. Not black, but less than black. NASA's early tracking models labeled it Object K 492, though the public would later know it by a simpler, more haunting name, the Shadow. At first, scientists thought it was a data artifact, perhaps interference from solar radiation. But when James Webb's high-resolution infrared array captured it, all doubt vanished. The shadow was real, and it was accelerating, not toward the Sunday, not toward Earth, but directly toward 3I Atlas. Inside NASA's mission analysis room, rows of monitors displayed the predicted trajectory. The lines converged like two threads destined to cross one bright, one dark meeting near the orbit of Jupiter. "What are the odds of this?" one analyst whispered. The answer, according to the math, was impossible. Two interstellar objects, unrelated by origin or velocity, entering the same solar system within a century was already astronomically rare. But two objects intercepting each other inside the gravitational well of Jupiter? That wasn't chance. That was choreography. By mid-December, the world's media began catching fragments of the truth. Anonymous leaks, encrypted videos, strange whispers on dark forums, each claiming to show two visitors moving through the void. And yet, official space agencies remained silent. Privately, however, panic was building. The European Space Agency, JAXA, and NASA jointly launched an emergency observation program, Operation Parallax. Dozens of telescopes were synchronized across the planet to monitor both objects simultaneously. Even radio observatories that had been dormant for years were reactivated. The data was overwhelming. Every night, the distance between 3I Atlas and the shadow shrank. Not randomly, precisely, exactly 300,000 kilometers per day. And yet, neither object showed any visible form of propulsion. No jets, no energy emissions, no debris trail. They simply drifted toward each other, guided by something unseen. Around this time, a strange phenomenon began affecting spacecraft across the inner solar system. NASA's Parker Solar Probe, orbiting close to the Sun, recorded short bursts of static interference every time 3I Atlas pulsed. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter briefly lost telemetry for exactly 7 seconds, the same interval as the object's repeating signal. Even the Voyager 2 probe, billions of kilometers away, picked up faint rhythmic vibrations in its deep space transmissions. It was as though every man-made device, from the inner planets to the edge of the heliosphere, was being synchronized to the same beat. Dr. Shaw noticed the pattern first. She overlaid the pulse intervals against the predicted convergence time of the two objects. And what she found was horrifyingly elegant. Every pulse, every flicker, every electromagnetic fluctuation across both objects formed a countdown, a precise, self-repeating sequence leading to one exact point in time. January 4th, 2026. That was when 3I Atlas and the shadow would intersect. Meanwhile, James Webb's instruments, despite official lockouts, continued to collect passive data. Some of the engineers had written covert scripts that allowed them to bypass the encryption filters. What they found in those final images defied reason. The core of 3I Atlas, the glowing eye at its center, had changed shape. It was no longer circular. Now it resembled a geometric lattice, hexagonal, then triangular, then something in between. Each configuration seemed to flash in sync with the object's internal pulse. But more disturbing was what they saw next. Every time 3I Atlas changed form, a corresponding shadow ripple appeared in the direction of the second object, as if space itself were folding and stretching, like fabric being pulled tight between 2 points. One researcher described it best. It's like they're communicating through gravity. By the 3rd week of December, something strange began happening to Earth's magnetosphere. Tiny, rhythmic fluctuations appeared in the upper ionosphere, repeating every 7.9 seconds, the same signature as before. But the frequency was shifting slightly, aligning with the projected positions of both objects. Satellites across low orbit began experiencing micro-signal dropouts, always synchronized to those fluctuations. It was subtle, a blink here, a lost frame there, but enough for engineers to notice. And when they analyzed the spectrum of the interference, they found something buried deep in the noise. A pattern, binary data, encoded, deliberate, and complex. The first attempt to decode it was clumsy. Most believed it was a coincidence, numerical randomness caused by solar wind scattering. But when the data was cleaned and run through linguistic analysis software, a strange translation emerged. The binary, when converted to alphanumeric symbols, didn't form a language. It formed coordinates that pointed back to a very specific point in the Pacific Ocean, a location so deep it was nearly unreachable. Latitude, negative 15.91 degrees. Longitude, negative 144.27 degrees. An empty patch of water in the middle of nowhere. NASA didn't make the discovery public, but 2 days later, seismic stations in the Pacific registered something unusual. A single vibration low, sustained, lasting almost 4 minutes. It wasn't tectonic, and it didn't match any known geological activity. It came from deep beneath the ocean floor. The frequency of that vibration matched the pulse of 3I Atlas. It was no longer just a space phenomenon. Something beneath Earth had answered. At that point, all global monitoring systems were overwhelmed. Energy readings across the solar system were increasing exponentially. But there was something else, something only visible to telescopes with extreme infrared sensitivity. Between 3I Atlas and the shadow, faint filaments of light began forming, streams of matter glowing like silver threads connecting the two objects across millions of kilometers. Each strand pulsed with light in precise rhythm, like veins carrying energy between them. And yet, no human technology could explain how. It wasn't plasma. It wasn't radiation. It was something entirely new. A structure forming not physically, but dimensionally. Scientists called it the bridge, a term whispered in private briefings and classified meetings. Some believed it was a wormhole under construction. Others thought it was a form of energy transfer or communication on a scale beyond comprehension. But deep down, a few suspected something far more disturbing. That the bridge wasn't being built, it was being repaired. The clock was ticking. Every system on Earth, from orbiting satellites to deep space telescopes, was now receiving the same rhythmic pulse, stronger, clearer, impossible to ignore. By December 31st, the world's instruments were in sync with it. The frequency no longer fluctuated. It had stabilized. The bridge was almost complete, but still there were no signs of aggression, no attacks, no destruction. Only a growing sense that something monumental, something old, was awakening. NASA's final public statement was brief. Observations continue. The object known as 3I Atlas remains stable and non-threatening. Further details are classified. But those who had seen the real data knew better. In the raw feed from Webb's last recording before the telescope was shut down, a single reflection appeared from within the object's core. Not random, not chaotic, but perfectly geometric. It was the outline of a shape familiar, haunting, and unmistakable. A human face. By the time January arrived, the pulse from 3I Atlas had become the heartbeat of the solar system. You could plot it like clockwork. Every 7.9 seconds, one steady beat, echoing through every instrument in orbit, through radio towers, even through the faint static of old communication lines. It was no longer isolated. It was everywhere. For scientists, it became more than a signal. It became time itself. Across space agencies, data centers synchronized their internal clocks to the pulse. A strange harmony formed, accidental, unplanned. Every system on Earth, human or mechanical, began to tick in unison with an object older than recorded history. And though few admitted it out loud, the synchronization felt almost peaceful. Like the universe had chosen a new rhythm, and humanity had simply fallen into step. But not everyone found comfort in that rhythm. Inside the Goddard Space Flight Center, Dr. Shaw sat alone at her terminal late one night, replaying the signal on loop. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. The soft green glow of the data streams painted her face as she muttered quietly to herself. It's not communication. It's calibration. She zoomed in on the waveform, each pulse identical, perfect. Yet when overlaid over time, tiny distortions appeared in the harmonics. They weren't errors. They were adjustments. Each one compensating for something like the object was slowly fine-tuning itself, aligning with invisible parameters scattered across space. Not signaling, she whispered again. It's syncing. Days later, a strange pattern began to appear in the background noise of Earth's ionosphere. At first, it looked like random solar interference, but when spectrographs from multiple observatories were compared, a clear image emerged, a faint repeating spiral forming in the upper atmosphere every time the pulse peaked. The spiral was vast, stretching across thousands of kilometers, but invisible to the naked eye. It was made of electromagnetic energy, twisting and fading like a phantom fingerprint burned into the sky. When data from the Arctic and the Pacific regions were overlaid, the spirals formed something even more complex. A global pattern, as if the pulse were shaping the planet's magnetic field into geometric order. Earth wasn't just receiving the signal anymore. It was responding. Meanwhile, out beyond Mars, the distance between 3I Atlas and the shadow continued to close. By now, telescopes captured both in the same frame, one glowing faintly gold, the other a deep, empty black, like the dual eyes of some impossible being watching from the void. Their relative motion made no sense. Every calculation said their orbits should drift apart, but instead they drew closer, obeying laws of gravity that shouldn't exist. At 0.001 astronomical units apart, Webb's unfiltered data caught something breathtaking. A thin aurora-like veil began to shimmer between them, not light, not plasma, but a distortion in the very fabric of space. The background stars behind the veil twisted, stretched, and then vanished for an instant before reappearing. It was as if space itself were bending, not around mass, but around intent. On January 8th, a small team of researchers at the European Southern Observatory noticed another anomaly, a frequency spike that wasn't part of the pulse pattern. It appeared just once, a single burst of energy at 3.21 gigahertz, lasting less than half a second. When converted into an image spectrogram, the burst revealed something haunting, a ring structure like a circular symbol with faint intersecting lines through its center, the same pattern that appeared in the ultraviolet beam weeks before. They ran it through translation software, comparing it to mathematical constants, languages, even orbital equations. Nothing matched. It wasn't a code. It was a signature, like a seal. Around this time, subtle gravitational fluctuations began affecting nearby bodies. Jupiter's magnetosphere, the largest in the solar system, began to oscillate slightly, not violently, but rhythmically, as though echoing a distant drumbeat. Its auroras grew brighter, spiraling higher into the planet's upper atmosphere, glowing in colors never seen before, crimson, violet, and cold white. And from Earth, through telescopes and faint reflections of satellites, humanity caught its first visible glimpse of what was happening near Jupiter. It wasn't just light anymore. It was movement. Astronomers described the scene as surreal, a faint silver haze stretching between the two interstellar objects, flickering like a net of lightning trapped in slow motion. Within the haze, patterns appeared swirling, self-replicating, vanishing as soon as they were formed. Every frame captured looked slightly different, as if time itself were stuttering. NASA analysts noted a shocking discovery. The geometry inside the haze matched theoretical models for higher dimensional resonance, an idea once dismissed as pure fiction. It was as though two alien machines were using the laws of physics like instruments, bending them, shaping them, composing a song no human could hear. And at the center of that composition, the pulse continued, relentless, so quiet, yet so absolute. For weeks, the world watched in silence. No official broadcast, no NASA live stream, only distant amateur footage, grainy, overexposed frames of faint light near Jupiter, slowly forming what looked like a single colossal object. But inside the walls of NASA's classified program, the images were clearer. 3I Atlas was changing. Its reflective shell began to fracture, not shatter, but unfold. Panels, seamless and metallic, rotated outward in perfect symmetry. Each movement revealed glowing structures beneath the surface, intricate, crystalline, and almost organic in form. The transformation wasn't violent. It was graceful, like a flower blooming in the dark. And then came something that silenced even the skeptics. As the object unfolded, one of its inner layers displayed a reflection of something that made no sense. A blue marble surrounded by white clouds. Earth, perfectly mirrored, perfectly positioned, hovering within the object's core. At first, scientists thought it was an optical illusion, a refraction effect caused by gravitational distortion. But no, the data confirmed the reflection contained real-time atmospheric movement. It was showing Earth as it was now. The object was reflecting us, watching us, or worse, remembering us. Every day that passed, the changes grew more precise. The bridge between 3I Atlas and the shadow pulsed brighter, weaving patterns that bent space like water. And within that bridge, the faint outline of something massive, larger than any planet, began to take form. No one could say what it was. Not yet. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. Whatever was about to happen wasn't beginning. It was returning. By mid-January, the pulse from 3I Atlas was no longer a phenomenon for scientists alone. It had become a global rhythm, a quiet metronome beating beneath the surface of everything. Every radio signal, every long-wave transmission, even some power grids began to hum in perfect sync with it. No one noticed it at first, but then strange things began to happen. People in distant parts of the world, people who had never met, never spoken, started reporting the same dreams. They described seeing a vast light pulsing behind a curtain of dark clouds. In the dreams, the light never moved closer, but they could feel it watching them, waiting. Children, in particular, were affected most. Teachers noticed students staring off into space, tapping their fingers on desks every 8 seconds, unconsciously matching the cosmic rhythm. Some even whispered numbers in their sleep sequences that later matched fragments of the decoded signal. Across the globe, the pattern was identical. The world's religious and spiritual leaders were divided. Some saw it as divine intervention, a cosmic heartbeat uniting all of creation. Others warned it was a signal of reckoning, a warning that humanity had reached its final threshold. Governments, of course, had their own explanation. They called it resonant signal exposure, claiming the rhythmic interference had subtle neurological effects caused by electromagnetic resonance. But even the agencies making those statements didn't believe them. Because deep in every major observatory, NASA, ESA, and the Chinese Space Authority researchers were quietly seeing something that didn't fit any human pattern. Whenever the pulse struck, the Schumann resonance Earth's natural electromagnetic frequency surged, just slightly, but in perfect sync. It was as if Earth's heartbeat was being adjusted to match that of 3I Atlas. The phenomenon became known among scientists as the synchronization event. No one dared speak of it publicly. Yet privately, teams all over the world were collecting data that told the same unsettling story. Human brainwaves, especially during sleep, began to show rhythmic entrainment with the cosmic pulse. The frequency aligned with the brain's theta state, the state of deep relaxation, intuition, and dreams. In that state, thousands reported hearing faint whispers, tones, and words that felt both familiar and alien. One phrase, repeated across multiple recordings, emerged from those subconscious echoes. The return of silence. No one knew what it meant, but everyone who heard it felt the same thing, an unshakable calm, followed by a growing fear they couldn't explain. Meanwhile, back at NASA's Deep Space Command, the situation around Jupiter had entered a critical phase. Both 3I Atlas and the Shadow were now inside Jupiter's magnetic influence. The bridge between them had expanded into a translucent band of light stretching thousands of kilometers wide. It pulsed rhythmically, yet softly, almost hypnotic, like the breathing of a sleeping colossus. Webb's last encrypted captures revealed something extraordinary. Within the band, smaller filaments of light, hundreds of them, were moving independently, twisting like strands of DNA. Each one pulsed with data packets resembling binary transmissions. The team realized they weren't just watching energy, they were watching information transfer. It was as though 3I Atlas was uploading or downloading something massive across an invisible network spanning millions of kilometers. The data volume grew so large that NASA's servers began to overload. Entire arrays dedicated to decoding the transmissions started burning out. One facility in Virginia lost power for 13 minutes after a relay failure triggered by the incoming data stream. When systems rebooted, engineers found fragments of corrupted data that appeared to contain images. Not satellite photos, not schematics, but shapes. Geometric blueprints resembling structures, towers, rings, and what appeared to be massive circular constructs scattered across a planetary surface. One image clearly resembled Earth's Pacific region, but not as it is now. It was darker, and it showed faint glowing lines beneath the ocean, stretching like circuitry veins across the sea floor. When this data reached Dr. Shaw, she didn't speak for a full minute. Then she simply said, "We're not the first to receive this signal. Outside the walls of space agencies, subtle disturbances began affecting technology everywhere. GPS systems flickered. Timekeeping devices, even atomic clocks, began to drift, aligning themselves subconsciously to the pulse. No matter how many times technicians recalibrated, the drift returned within hours. It was as though human time itself was being overwritten. And then came the auroras. Across the poles and eventually as far south as Mexico, Egypt, and southern Japan, vast curtains of light began filling the night sky. They shimmered in unnatural colors, deep violet, blood orange, cold silver, and moved with the same slow rhythm as the pulse. The world stood outside and watched, mesmerized. For a moment, even fear seemed to stop. In the midst of the spectacle, a faint vibration rolled across Earth's magnetic field, not enough to cause damage, but enough to be felt in the bones. People describe it as a soft hum, resonating deep in their chests. It wasn't sound, exactly more like presence. And with that presence came another shift. At precisely 3:11 UTC, every seismic station on Earth registered the same event, a microscopic tremor, identical in duration and frequency, repeated twice. The signal matched the resonance of the bridge near Jupiter. Earth had pulsed back. The effect on humanity was subtle but immediate. Sleep patterns shifted globally. More than 60% of the population began entering REM cycles faster, staying there longer. Dream reports flooded online communities, not nightmares, not hallucinations, but visions of light and geometry, floating shapes, distant music. Some described hearing a single repeating phrase, not in any known language, but somehow understood. You were remembered. Psychologists dismissed it as mass suggestion. Physicists knew better. The data was too perfect, too consistent. Every measurable system, biological, magnetic, and mechanical, was responding as one. Earth was becoming part of the signal. Meanwhile, inside NASA's data archive bunker, Dr. Shaw and her dwindling team worked through exhaustion. Most of the staff had been reassigned, their access revoked after government oversight claimed data misinterpretation. But Shaw's small circle kept their link to Webb's archive running, feeding on the last images before the telescope's systems were forced into hibernation. And in those final frames, taken before Webb went dark, the most breathtaking discovery appeared. Within the bridge's luminous haze near Jupiter, thousands of small metallic glints flickered in motion, tiny organized patterns orbiting the main structure. At first, they thought it was debris, but when magnified, the glints formed into formations, perfect formations, swarming, coordinated. They weren't debris, they were ships. The team sat in silence. No one spoke. No one moved. The image wasn't static. The swarms rotated around 3I Atlas, not attacking, not escaping, just waiting. Their movement was methodical, like satellites orbiting a central node. Some even reflected light back toward the object impulses, amplifying the bridge's glow. It looked like they were completing something, building something. A structure far greater than anything in human history, a structure spanning worlds. And in the last set of images before data transmission ceased completely, Webb's infrared lens picked up one more anomaly. The bridge wasn't just light anymore. It had mass, and it was expanding outward toward the inner solar system. By the third week of January, the bridge had become visible not just to telescopes, but to the naked eye. At first, it appeared faint, a pale streak low in the night sky near Jupiter's orbit, glowing softly against the dark. But night after night, it grew brighter. Not like a star, but like a slow wound opening across the heavens. People began calling it the ribbon. Others, more poetically, called it the vein of God. It stretched from horizon to horizon, a shimmering arc so massive that astronomers could no longer deny what they were seeing. The structure connecting 3I Atlas and the shadow wasn't just energy. It was physical, and it was expanding toward the inner solar system. NASA's official stance was silence. But data leaks, the kind that never stay buried, began spreading through encrypted networks. Screenshots of deep field imagery, fragments of telemetry, whispered voice memos from inside the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. All of them painted the same picture. The bridge wasn't just coming closer, it was anchoring. It was latching onto gravitational fields like a spider web of light, attaching itself to planets and moons as if weaving something enormous, something permanent. On January 20th, the first gravitational fluctuations were recorded. Tiny at first, undetectable to most instruments, but by the next day, ocean tides on Earth began to shift out of their normal rhythm by a fraction of a second. That may not sound like much, but to scientists, it was the cosmic equivalent of the universe taking a breath. Across the globe, sky watchers flooded social media with videos. The bridge shimmered faintly across the night sky like a thin aurora, visible even from city rooftops. It looked impossibly large, stretching across the heavens, its center pulsing every 8 seconds with a cold silver-blue light. Some viewers swore they could see movement inside, its slow ripples, like something massive drifting within. Others dismissed it as imagination. But every astronomer knew what they were seeing wasn't imagination at all, because the bridge's endpoint was moving. Every hour, its trajectory shifted slightly away from Jupiter and toward Earth. Inside NASA's Deep Space Command, the atmosphere was quiet, not with panic, but with the heavy silence that comes when humans realize they're out of time. Dr. Shaw, her hair unkempt and eyes hollow from sleepless nights, watched the telemetry stream scroll endlessly across her monitor. Numbers, coordinates, and light curves, all pointing toward one undeniable conclusion. The bridge wasn't just expanding randomly. It was following something. She overlaid the coordinates of the expanding arc across the inner solar system, tracing its intersection points. When she saw the alignment, her stomach dropped. The curve matched Earth's orbital path exactly, not approximate, exact. The bridge wasn't reaching for Earth by coincidence. It was programmed to. At 4:22 UTC, the Deep Space Network received a final unencrypted transmission from one of Webb's secondary data relays, a relay that should have been offline. The transmission was only 6 seconds long, but it contained a compressed visual signal. When decoded, it showed a panoramic sweep of the bridge's structure. The image wasn't static. It pulsed alive, almost breathing, and embedded faintly within its lattice pattern were shapes that no one could deny. Cylindrical modules, hundreds, maybe thousands of them, each evenly spaced along the structure like ribs on a spine. NASA analysts enhanced the contrast, and that's when they saw it. Tiny dots moving between the modules. Not random particles, objects, vessels. And one, much larger than the rest, was emerging from the center of 3I Atlas. It was around this same time that strange electromagnetic echoes began hitting Earth's ionosphere again, stronger than ever. This time, the signals weren't binary. They were structured audio tones, harmonic frequencies layered on top of each other, forming a resonance unlike anything seen before. When filtered and slowed down, the tones revealed something chilling. They matched human vocal harmonics. In other words, the signal sounded human. Researchers tried isolating the waveform, and what they heard made them stop breathing. A voice calm, faint, distorted by distance, whispering in English. 5 words. We were never far away. By January 24th, global power systems began experiencing short, rhythmic brownouts. They weren't random, they followed the same 7.9-second cycle as the pulse. Each blackout lasted less than half a second, too brief to cause damage, but long enough to be noticed. Cities flickered in unison across continents, like Earth itself was blinking. And every time the lights returned, the sky looked slightly different. The bridge had grown larger, denser, brighter, closer. Satellite operators began reporting strange telemetry drift. Orbital paths were shifting by millimeters enough to throw off communication networks. But when engineers recalculated, they realized something terrifying. It wasn't that satellites were drifting. Space itself was. By late January, the auroras became constant. What had once been a beautiful spectacle now stretched across the entire sky, even at the equator. They pulsed faintly in silver and violet hues, rippling in perfect sync with the bridge. And then, something new appeared. Faint streams of light descending vertically from the upper atmosphere, vanishing before reaching the ground. They looked like rain made of plasma, but sensors showed no radiation, no heat, no energy signatures of any kind, just light. Some people began reporting electrical sensations during those moments, a static charge that felt almost like touch. And others claimed to hear faint whispers echoing from the air around them. One man in Finland recorded a chilling audio clip during one of these lightfalls. When analyzed, the waveform displayed repeating peaks that spelled out a sequence. 3, 1, A, T, L, A, S. The signal was saying its own name. Governments began shutting down communication satellites in panic, afraid the pulse might interfere or infiltrate systems. But the silence did little to stop what was already happening. Every living organism on Earth, from whales in the ocean to birds in the sky, began moving in strange synchronization patterns. Whales swam in unison across thousands of kilometers. Migratory birds changed their flight routes, forming perfect spirals in the air that matched the bridge's geometry. Even deep-sea sensors picked up acoustic pulses, resonating from the ocean floor, identical to the one detected months earlier. Earth itself was humming. Meanwhile, Dr. Shaw's final recordings from the Deep Space Network revealed one last terrifying clue. The light bridge had now connected completely between 3I Atlas and the shadow. But instead of stopping, it began to duplicate fractal strands, branching outward toward multiple directions. One of those branches was now locked onto Earth's position, and its velocity was increasing. When she ran the time simulation, the result made her go cold. At its current acceleration rate, The branch would reach Earth's orbit in 7 days. The team prepared to send one last broadcast through the deep space antenna array. Not a message of resistance, not even of warning, just a single, desperate question beamed toward 3i Atlas before the bridge completed its reach. Why now? The reply came instantly, faster than any light signal should have been able to travel. It wasn't text. It wasn't sound. It was a simple data burst containing one phrase, translated perfectly when decrypted. Because you looked back. The signals began to shift. At first, it was just data, noise, rhythmic pulses buried inside the spectrum of deep space telemetry. The analysts at Goddard thought it was solar interference. But when the pulses started matching the Schumann resonance of Earth's ionosphere, 7.83 Hz, exactly the chatter inside NASA's secure channels, turned into silence. No one said it aloud, but every expert felt it. 3i Atlas was no longer just moving through space. It was synchronizing. Within days of its closest pass by the Moon, the first anomalies began. The lunar magnetometer array recorded harmonic tremors across the Moon's crust, ripples in the regolith like sound waves in dust. Some of them aligned perfectly with human-made radio frequencies, others with nothing ever observed. Then, Earth itself began to sing back. The magnetosphere, our invisible shield, started oscillating in perfect intervals. The same rhythm, the same heartbeat, 7.83 Hz, as if something vast and unseen were tuning our planet like an instrument. The James Webb telescope caught it first, a flicker on the far side of the Moon. Not light, not reflection, distortion. The stars behind the Moon warped, bending slightly, as though space itself was being pulled, twisted, and folded into something that shouldn't exist. And then, for the first time, the Webb's infrared sensors picked up what appeared to be a shape inside the distortion. A massive structure not orbiting, but anchored, stretching between the Moon and the object itself. It wasn't made of matter as we understood it. The readings described a lattice of electromagnetic filaments, almost like veins of plasma suspended in vacuum. It was building something, or maybe finishing something that had already begun. Inside NASA's Deep Space Division, researchers quietly renamed the phenomenon. They stopped calling it 3i Atlas. They began calling it the bridge. The bridge wasn't visible to the human eye, not directly, but the Moon's surface began showing faint, luminous scars like glowing rivers beneath the regolith. And at those same coordinates, seismic activity rose sharply with patterns that matched no geological origin. By the third day, telescopes around the world began catching it too. China's Chang'e array, ESA's deep lunar spectrometers, even civilian telescopes. Every frame showed the same impossible sight. The shadow of something enormous, a semi-transparent structure reaching outward like a colossal arc spanning the void between worlds. The only image that survived declassification was a frame captured by Webb's secondary mirror at 4:17 UTC. The official caption read, "Unidentified reflective diffraction at L1, L2 midpoint." But to those who saw the raw file, it wasn't a reflection. It was an eye, a vast, radiant eye opening in slow motion through the distortion field. The eye wasn't physical. It was energy, a lens of light forming inside the electromagnetic veil. Every 90 seconds, it pulsed once, releasing a concentric ring of energy that rippled through the upper atmosphere. Power grids across North America flickered in perfect synchronization. Satellites went dark, then rebooted, as if something was probing through them one by one. The world had never been quieter. No announcements, no press conferences, only the hum, that deep, low-frequency vibration that seemed to come from inside the Earth itself. And then came the data leak. An encrypted file appeared on an internal NASA relay transmitted from an untraceable address bearing a simple subject line: "Is greater than do not try to contact it." Inside was a fragment of decoded telemetry, repeating coordinates, and one chilling translation: "Is greater than the structure is not approaching. Earth is." Within the next few hours, high-altitude radar confirmed what no one wanted to believe. Earth's orbital path had deviated just slightly, by less than 1/10 of a degree, but enough to alter everything. The gravitational harmonics from the bridge weren't pulling the object closer. They were pulling us. The oceans began to swell slightly off rhythm. The jet streams flickered with iridescent bands of light, not auroras, but static discharges forming patterns across the sky. Mathematicians at Caltech found repeating sequences embedded in the oscillations, Fibonacci ratios, symmetrical progressions that defied randomness. Nature had stopped improvising. It was now following a script. Back at the Webb Observatory, one final image was captured before the sensors burned out. The bridge was now fully visible in infrared, spanning the gulf between the Moon and Earth, shimmering with patterns that looked almost biological, like neurons, like thought made visible. Some said it was a message, others whispered it was a threshold. But to those who saw it, those who felt the harmonic pulse in their bones, it was neither. It was a mirror. And for the first time in human history, the universe was looking back. The final transmission from James Webb came without sound, just static, flickering frames and a single line of telemetry code that repeated endlessly until the feed went dark. When decoded, it wasn't numbers. It was a pattern of light, like neural activity, like thought. Hidden inside those pulses was an image, not of the object, but of us. Every detail, the continents, the oceans, the faint trace of city lights reflected within that eye of energy. And just beneath it, another shape, an echo of our planet, orbiting within the pulse itself, not made of matter, but of pure resonance. NASA shut down public access within seconds. The observatories went offline, and the last words spoken across the secure line were simple and quiet. Is greater than. It's not visiting us. It's remembering us. After that, silence. No more data, no more leaks, only the hum fading slowly across the magnetosphere until it became indistinguishable from the Earth's own natural frequency. Maybe that's how it ends. Or maybe that's how it begins. If you're still here, don't just watch the next video, listen to it. Because the next signal might not come from NASA. It might come from what's listening to us. Subscribe before you leave, because this story isn't over. Something out there has already answered, and the next discovery will change everything.